Imagine what this world would look like if we all knew the laws of creation, if we all knew the laws that this universe abides by and operates according to. Imagine what this world would look like if we all understood the foundations that make up this universe, and thus were able to see through the illusions of separation, of time, of death. Imagine what this world would look like. You see, if we knew the laws of creation like we currently know the laws of electricity, then guiding our lives and creating the reality that we want to experience in this present moment would be as simple as flipping a light switch. And the purpose of this series is to do just that, to help you understand the foundations, to help you see through the illusions, to help you transcend the matrix that we've been indoctrinated to believe is the only thing that exists. It's not, and in this series, I'm going to show you how to transcend that. I'm going to show you the foundations, the laws of creation, to not tell you what to think, but to teach you how to think. My name is Jason Shurka, and I'm your host for Forming the Formless, a 10-part series based on the first book that I've ever written, called Forming the Formless, a book, and in this case, a series that is going to teach you how to really peel back the layers of the universe, understand what the matrix is, and teach you how to transcend it by teaching you the foundations of the universe and helping you see through the current illusions that we live limited lives according to, because we actually believe that they actually exist. Things like separation, time, death, they don't actually exist. And when you understand the foundations, you will understand why that is all an illusion to begin with. And I'm not speaking on just the surface. I'm speaking about the core of creation, understanding how things work spiritually, understanding how things work energetically. When we understand those laws, we understand everything else. In other words, nobody will tell you what to think anymore. My intention is to teach you how to think, because if you learn how to think, then you will never again externalize your power to simply trusting what somebody says. You will have the proper tools to come down to your own conclusions once and for all. And that's the key of taking our power back. That's the key of reclaiming our power. We do so through awareness. We do so through pure and true consciousness. If we have that true universal awareness, nobody can misguide us, because we're no longer relying on somebody else's word by them telling us what to think. We're using our own tools that you are going to learn and really remember throughout this 10-part series. So you can think for yourself. And when you can think for yourself, nobody will ever be able to take your power away. You will never give your power away, ever again, because that power resides in the awareness that you possess. And through this series, you will begin and hopefully complete to remember. Throughout this 10-part series, I'm going to be teaching about 6 foundations and 3 illusions. The foundations, once again, are meant to teach you how the universe works. They're meant to show you the laws in action in a very practical and accessible way, in a way that each and every one of you will be able to understand, no matter what level of your path you're currently at. The illusions, on the other hand, are illusions that most people actually believe. Those 3 illusions are separation, time, and death. And only once you understand and truly remember, and I use the word remember and not learn, because this is a remembrance process. This is a path of remembrance. You already know what I'm going to be teaching you. I'm just helping you remember in your mind so you can connect the heart and the mind, remember what your soul already knows, and bring it into this present experience, your present experience right here, right now. So once again, when you understand, when you remember the foundations, you will see through the illusions and thus transcend the matrix. When you transcend the matrix, you become the creator of your life once again. You become the conscious guide of the movie of life that you're living through. You'll be able to guide everything around you and everything within you once you understand these tools, once you see through these illusions, because nothing will be able to have power over you anymore. Once you have that pure and true remembrance of awareness that you truly come from, that you already have that you will uncover through this 10-part series. The 6 foundations that I'm going to be teaching and explaining more deeply at the end of this episode include the following: the formless realm, understanding the ego, the language of energy, the line of manifestation, the harmony of balance, and diving deep within. And the 3 illusions include the illusion of separation, the illusion of time, and the illusion of death. Once again, I will be explaining each and every one of these foundations and illusions and what I'm going to be covering closer to the end of this episode, so stay tuned. And yes, if you pay attention, there are 6 foundations, 3 illusions, all together making 9. And for those of you who have followed anything having to do with Tesla and his codes and the codes behind his work, you will know the importance and significance of 369. All of this was done intentionally when I was writing this book, and all of this is being done intentionally while I'm making this series for each and every one of you to learn from and to remember where you truly come from so you can know where you can go. Now, before I go deeper into the foundations and the illusions within this book and within this series that I'm going to teach and help you all remember, to help you really access that power that you already have within you, help you take control and guide everything that's happening around you and within you in a productive and conscious way, I want to share the backstory of how I came to all of these realizations in the first place. I want to share the inspiration behind why I wrote this book and how this became to being the first book I've ever written. I want to share the inspiration of why I chose to make this the first solo original series that I'm creating on Unified TV and for the platform as a whole. And I'm choosing to share this story, not to tell you a story about myself, but because I do believe that each and every one of you will be able to relate to it one way or another, with the hopes that it will inspire you to expand on your own realizations, to transmute and alchemize your hardships of your experiences throughout life, of either physical injuries, physical hardships, or emotional hardships of feeling isolated and alone and ostracized from society as a whole, because you are different. I know each and every one of you are different. That's why you're watching this. That's why you're on this platform. That's why you're choosing to go through this process and choosing to do the work to expand and elevate your own consciousness and awareness. So my story starts from my first ever memory. When I was 4 years old, I've shared this story in the past, so I will share a very brief summary of the story and how these realizations came to me in the first place, once again to inspire you to hopefully do the same thing in your own unique, individual, and creative way. My first memory was when I was 4 years old. I always thought different. I always saw things different. I always saw things in a more expansive way than most people around me, in terms of not seeing death as a tragic thing, seeing death as an extension to the cycle of life, a different part of the cycle of life. And at first, nobody really looked at me weird because I was just a little kid. But when I was 4 years old, my great-grandfather passed away. My mother sat me and my sister down and told us that my great-grandfather passed away. And of course, my sister started crying, and my first question was, well, how did he die? And she said, he fell asleep and he never woke up. And I thought that was the most beautiful thing. But of course, coming from a 4-year-old, that's a little weird, compared to what's going on relative to other 4-year-olds in the world, relative to most other people in the world at that point. And I didn't understand that. I understood that once I expressed that, certain people around me were like, what? What? Fast forward a few years, I'm 9 years old. My grandfather passes away. He had Alzheimer's. I knew that he was suffering for a large majority of that point of his life. Years and years and years, the man was suffering. Once again, my mother sat me and my sister down, and she told us, your grandfather passed away. And of course, many people were sad, but the first emotion that came to me was I was happy for him. I was happy for him because he was no longer suffering. But I was faced with a lot of resistance when I expressed that to certain people around me. There were certain people that were telling me, you don't have a soul. What's wrong with you? Your grandfather just died. And I didn't know what to do. So I did what every 9-year-old would do. I did what every little kid would do. I changed, I adapted just to fit in. And I did such a good job at adapting that I actually forgot who I was. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be like everybody else around me, especially in school, because I didn't want to be the odd one out. I didn't want to be weird. So I started fitting in. I did what everybody else did. I did my best to be that popular kid, and I threw parties, and I had all the friends, and I did everything that you would see in the stereotypical movie of what a popular kid did. But it wasn't me. It wasn't who I truly was. I was interested in many, many different things having to do with how this universe was created. If this universe was created, then I understood the law of conservation. With energy cannot be created or destroyed. I was interested in a lot of things that kids my age were not. So I looked the other way and I kind of did it behind the scenes. I was always interested, but I never expressed that. And between the ages of 14 to 18, from 2011 to 2015, and by the way, today I am 25, but from 2011 to 2015, I experienced a series of very, very painful events. There was a point in time, specifically throughout those 4 years, where I was not listening to what God and what the universe was telling me. I simply wanted to fit in, and fitting in meant I did things that was damaging my spiritual evolution, my spiritual ascension. And I did what every other kid did, but it damaged me. It separated me from my true power. And I was doing that subconsciously because I wanted it. So over a period of 4 years, from 2011 to 2015, I went through a painful series of events. I dislocated this shoulder 23 times. At that point, I was in a sling for more than 5% of my life. I got 3 shoulder surgeries, almost needing a mechanical shoulder by age 18. And that really scared me. Fast forward a little bit, I got a staph infection in my leg while I was on a backpacking trip in Thailand. I was about 18 years old. I was in Thailand by myself. I had to come back on an emergency flight, a 26-hour flight with 2 layovers, with the most agonizing pain of my life and nothing I could do about it. My leg was getting hot and hard and I did not know what was going on. The doctors told me that if I got there 8 hours later, I would have needed to get my leg amputated by age 18. They told me if I didn't get there within 48 hours, the staph infection would have went into my bloodstream and it probably would have killed me. And yet here I am sitting in front of you, being able to speak, unscathed, unscratched, unhurt, fully functional. Throughout that period of 4 years, I spent a lot of time in bed. I spent times in surgery and hospitals and recovery. It was almost like God, the universe, was pushing me into a place of needing to self-reflect, of needing to look at myself and ask myself, what's going on? Why is this happening? Why is God pushing these injuries upon me? And of course, that was the way that I chose to interpret it. And it was the most productive interpretation that I've ever made, because I was able to start asking myself, Jason, what are you doing? Why are you making believe to be somebody you're not? Who cares if people are going to think you're weird? And I'll never forget laying in that hospital bed for a week. Over my 19th birthday in the hospital, I experienced what stillness and silence was like for the first time in my life. I heard my heartbeat when I woke up one morning in the hospital, and I came to realize that the only reason my heart is beating is because of the moments of stillness in between each beat. And that's when I understood that stillness speaks. That's when I understood that all of our growth happens in those moments of meditation, in those moments of self-reflection, in those moments of pure presence and pure stillness. And so my journey began. I started going deep within. I started writing a journal. I started reading books for the first time in my life, and then I started writing books. And this first book that I'm now making into a series of explaining deeper into what each foundation and illusion is about is a consolidation of all of those endless journal entries and writings that I made throughout my period of time in pure presence, many times in the hospital, most times by myself, in pure isolation, looking around me, seeing the world around me, seeing the world within me, understanding that there's no difference between the external and the internal worlds, listening to the sounds around me, not choosing to identify them as what I was taught that they were, but just listening to them as what they truly are. And I started seeing things, and I started experiencing things, and I started seeing the world for what it truly was. I started seeing the tools that I was gaining without even realizing what I was accessing, the foundations of this universe that taught me how to see things in the most productive way. And those foundations are what I broke down into 6 major foundations that therefore helped me see through the illusions of separation, time, and death. Helped me be the most free person I've ever been. because I broke out of that spiritual enslavement and spiritual prison that the current narrative and the current mainstream media wants us to believe is the only thing that exists. We are infinite beings. We are powerful in all that we do. And when we come to realize the true power that we come from and the infinite source that we reside from, then you will know the power that you truly have within. Remember, my purpose of sharing this with each and every one of you right now is not to teach you anything. It's to help you remember. And another thing I want to help you remember at this point is wisdom cannot be taught. Wisdom can be remembered. Wisdom is knowledge and experience applied. You can have all the experience and all the knowledge that you want, but if you don't apply it, you will never be able to alchemize it into wisdom. Remember, wisdom cannot be taught. Wisdom can only be revealed because it's an energy that you have always had within you. And it's an energy and a reality that I will do my absolute best to help each and every one of you remember throughout this 10-part series of Forming the Formless, helping you access and elevate your spirit and soul. Before we begin this journey together, I want to read a letter to each and every one of you, a letter that I wrote to a dear friend of mine, a letter that actually inspired the writing of this book of Forming the Formless, and a letter that, of course, inspired me making this series in the first place. Now, this letter is on page 25 of this book, and if you don't have the book is free for all Unified TV members on the Unified TV library in the book section. So make sure to download it and read it as you go along this 10-part series, because it will help you uncover certain things as I teach and help you remember what I speak about throughout this 10-part series. So a few years ago, a good friend of mine asked me, Jason, if you could choose one person to emulate, dead or alive, who would it be and why? And I responded to him by writing the following letter. Nobody. Not Gandhi, not Martin Luther King, not Mother Teresa, no one. Although there is a lot to learn from these great people, following their direct individual paths will result in no change in the world other than what had already been done. Although they all embodied traits that create a better basis of being, such as optimism, acceptance, kindness, and unconditional love, the combination and the way these traits are applied are what truly matter. It is what creates originality. Look at it like a Rubik's Cube. It only has 26 individual pieces with 54 different visible squares. And yet there are over 43 quintillion different combinations. Just as we know every side of a Rubik's Cube, we also know every trait that exists. Kindness, compassion, and acceptance, to name a few. I'm not proposing that there are traits that we have not discovered yet. On the contrary, I believe we have discovered every trait and every quality. We know all our sides. However, we do not know all of our combinations. The problem is that we are working blindly, trying to make sense of a limitless universe with limited measures, the rational mind and the ego. However, if we as human beings take it upon ourselves to become more conscious and aware of not only our surroundings, but also our inner stillness, the light will rise, the darkness will dissipate, the ego will dissolve, and an innate guide will naturally lead the way. This guide is called intuition. Once we allow intuition to become our guide, blinded reason that is constrained with the limitations of the mind will disappear. Consciousness, awareness, and presence dissolve these limitations, in turn going beyond the mind. By being conscious, aware, and present at all times, naturally the people around you will do the same. The energy you emit is what others will receive. This in turn will naturally create a chain reaction of awareness across all of humanity and bring about a new wave of consciousness. The person I would like to evolve into will consist of traits and qualities that have existed since the beginning of time. However, not by adopting the combinations of traits that great people such as Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and Mother Teresa embodied, but by making a completely new combination. Remember, this series will not teach you something you don't already know in your heart and in your soul. This series will simply help you remember what your soul already knows. Connect the gap between the heart and the mind, and help you remember the access that you already have to limitless power. A new combination of the Rubik's Cube of life is about to be revealed, is about to be shared, And I invite each and every one of you to join me on this journey of remembering where you truly come from, who you truly are, and where you have the power to go. This 10-part series of Forming the Formless, with this being episode 1, will help you remember just that. It will help you activate certain parts of you that have been lying dormant for a very long time. It will shed light on certain topics and subjects, on foundations and illusions that have been hidden in plain sight for a very long time, and help you transcend beyond the matrix that we've been indoctrinated to believe is the only thing that truly exists. We are limitless beings that have limitless power. And the intention behind this 10-part series is to help you remember just that. Episode 2 will be all about the formless realm, teaching you and helping you remember where all form comes from, to show you how, sure, it all derives from a thought, but where does a thought come from? And how does knowing that help us guide everything in our lives to begin with? Episode 3 is all about understanding the ego, understanding the limitations that the ego places upon you, and most importantly, understanding how to transcend the ego part of you, how to dissolve the ego portion of you. Of course, the ego does hold a productive space in each and every one of our lives. But if we don't understand how it works and we don't understand how to guide and control it, then it can take over us. So episode 3 will teach you how to ensure that the ego does not take over you, use the ego only in productive ways, and transcend it when it takes over in counterproductive ways. Episode 4 is all about the language of the universe, the language of energy, the language that connects all things, tangible, intangible, animate, inanimate, alive or not alive, even though everything is alive, and I will speak about that throughout this series as well. Throughout episode 4, you will learn about the language of energy, how to understand it so you can understand how God and how the universe speaks to you in many, many, many different ways, including color, sound, shapes. Understanding all of these things will make it a whole lot easier to understand how the universe is communicating with you at all times. Episode 5 is all about the line of manifestation, explaining what separates the manifest from the unmanifest, what separates the formless from the form, and most importantly, guiding you and helping you remember how to guide the formless to become the form that you actually want to experience. Episode 6 is all about the harmony of balance, helping you remember the law of balance. When you understand the law of balance and how it works, you will be able to transcend and alchemize your perspective on the way that you see everything. Birth, death, creation, destruction, good, bad, light, dark. The law of balance will show you how those are all one and the same. And duality is also an illusion. And that brings us to episode 7, all about diving deep within, teaching you the foundations, the laws, and the importance of stillness, of silence, of presence, teaching you how to tap into that divine flow of intelligence, of creative genius. When you tap into that through plugging into stillness and presence and silence, you will be able to create wonders. You will be able to experience wonders. You will be able to experience miracles, and therefore you will be able to bring those miracles into your day-to-day life and help others experience that too. And of course, that brings us to episodes 8, 9, and 10, all about the illusions that we've been taught are real, that are not actually part of the fundamental universe, that are not actually part of the formless realm. Episode 8 is called The Illusion of Separation, and I will help you remember why separation doesn't actually exist. Yes, do we experience separate bodies? Sure, in our experience we do. But when we transcend that illusion, we're able to see the world in a whole different way. We are able to tap into universal awareness and universal consciousness, which is why it's so important to understand the illusion of separation, which will be spoken about in episode 8. Episode 9 is called The Illusion of Time, understanding why time has actually taken over us because we've forgotten that it is simply a tool to use within the matrix. Time does not exist outside of the matrix. Time does not exist in the fundamental universe. Why is that important? Does that mean that we get rid of time altogether? Absolutely not. Time is a practical tool that can help us do incredible things within the matrix. But it's important to understand why it is an illusion so we can transcend time and see the greater and bigger picture here, which brings me to the last episode, episode 10, called The Illusion of Death. A lot of us operate according to the fear of death. The past 2.5 years of doing things that are completely irrational was because of the fear of death. When we transcend the illusion of death and understand that death is just another part of the cycle of life, we are able to tap into that creative intelligence, that divine intelligence that makes up the foundations of the universe, and we are able to take control of our lives once again. So I invite each and every one of you to join me on this 10-part series of Forming the Formless, where we will uncover and unravel the foundations of the universe, see through the illusions that we've been indoctrinated to believe, and thus transcend the matrix that we've been indoctrinated to believe is the only thing that exists, helping each and every one of you access and elevate your spirit and soul. My name is Jason Shurka, and this is Forming the Formless. I'll see you all on the next episode, episode 2, where I speak all about the formless realm and everything you need to know, helping you remember where you come from and how to guide creation from the formless into the formed. Thank you all very much.